Everyone, my name's Helen Krysinski and I work for the Emergency Care Improvement Support Team, and we're really privileged to have Rob here today who's going to talk through single clerking. Rob, would you like to do an introduction?
Hi there, I'm Rob. I'm one of the A&E Consultants in Brighton. I've been involved in trying to improve our flow through the department for the last 5 to 10 years, and one of the things we've brought in at Brighton and Hayward Heath hospitals is single clerking. So thank you very much for asking me to speak about that today.
Fantastic. And obviously there's lots of organisations that would absolutely love to crack this to get single clerking in their departments. And I just wonder if it would be really helpful if you could share your experience and why and how you came about the changes.
Cool. So I suppose goes back to what it was like when I started as an SHO and then as a consultant. So you wouldn't, if you're going to reinvent the NHS, you wouldn't invent it how it is at the moment. So as a A&E, way it was in my department when I first started as a consultant and how it was as an SHO, long waits to see A&E doctors. So we'd see a patient, and as an A&E SHO, I thought did a decent clerking, wrote up all the plans, and then I'd refer it to a medical SHO. And I spent ages giving a beautiful handover, and they just say, "I'll put it on the whiteboard." Okay, that was my education from the medical team, to type something onto a whiteboard. They would wait a few hours to see the medical SHO, and then the medical SHO would then copy what the A&E SHO had done. And then they'd write it on different paper, which makes a massive difference on different paper. And then they'd eventually speak to their registrar about when we looked at, when we did studies, time motion studies at Brighton, the time from patient arrival to being discussed with a senior decision maker was an average of 17 hours. Now, that's got nothing to do with the 4-hour standard, because if I'd referred them at 3 hours, 30 minutes and they'd gone to AMU, everyone said that was an amazing success. But actually, when you look at it, the time to see a senior decision maker was 17 hours. So instead of, in a patient who could have been discharged now gets admitted because there's no transport, then, what could have been managed in the community now gets hospital-acquired infection, waste resources, bad for patients' care, but also very bad for education. So from my point of view, I wasn't, as an SHO, getting no education. When I was referring to the medical team, the medics, SHOs were getting disenfranchised because they're just copying what an A&E SHO was doing in some ways. So we just had this thought that this, just because, Einstein said insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting different results. We were doing the same thing over and over again, saying, oh, let's tweak somebody's A&E shift to try and solve patient safety. No, that wasn't. You needed a completely different way of doing things. We needed to get the senior decision maker to the patient as quickly as possible, and we needed to get wastage of double of people repeating the clerking to go. And the way of doing that is thinking that A&E juniors and medical juniors fulfill the same function. So an F2, if you're an A&E F2 and you've just come from, you were a medical F2 and now become an A&E F2, you don't suddenly become really, really rubbish just because you've worked in the A&E for 2 weeks. In induction, I don't say, forget all your knowledge and just write a really shoddy clerking. That's not what I teach people in induction. So just because you're an A&E F2 doesn't mean you're rubbish. And also, just because you're a medical F2 doesn't mean you have the answers. It's just you're just an F2 who's on rotation. So the first concept is to agree that all juniors on the acute floor are essentially generic. They happen to be doing an A&E job. They happen to be doing a medicine job. It doesn't really matter. Okay. Now that took some difficulties. There's a lot of historical or A&E doctors are failed orthopods. In all honesty, that is what a lot of people thought of. Now, I'm actually I've done meds, I've done my MSCP and ITU consultant. I just got no concentration span. That's why I'm an A&E consultant. So all A&E consultants have got no concentration span. It doesn't mean we're all useless. Now, that was one of the thoughts in the past by some medics who thought single clerking just wasn't appropriate because the A&E team wouldn't do a full clerking. But the other key concept is that you certainly do not want me to do a full clerking for a patient. My clerkings nowadays are pretty appalling. They're as short as possible to get the patient to go into the right way. It is not appropriate for me to write up the full clerking with all the details which are needed for the occupational therapists, the physios, etc., etc. No. But what is appropriate is if my F2 does a full clerking, that is as good as a medical F2. So the way we've got it is instead of these being doubly clerked, if an A&E F2 was the first person to pick up a patient, they would do the full clerking. And we got one booklet one with just all the information, so people didn't have to rewrite in it. So they did the full clerking, okay, with everything from the drug chart to the DVT prophylaxis. And if they didn't do it, then we educated them because they needed to do it to the same standards as the medical F2. This was for patients coming in. Certainly not if you're a minor seeing a stub toe. You wouldn't do the full clerking. If you know, this is a Doris who's 94, collapsed. She's almost definitely coming in. Okay, it's 3 in the morning. She's almost definitely coming in. So the A&E F2 would do the full clerking. They'll discuss it with the A&E consultant or A&E registrar who'd say, yes, needs to come in. And they'll refer directly to the medical registrar or the medical consultant. They wouldn't present to the medical SHO. They would go and present directly to the A&E, to the medical consultant, medical registrar, and do the review with them. So brilliant education for the A&E F2. And the patient got seen by a senior decision maker much quicker. We brought that time down from seeing a senior decision maker from 17 hours to under 4 hours. Now, it didn't solve our 4-hour target because there was, I'm sure you know, there's poor flow. Our wards in Brighton are built before Florence Nightingale was born, and we're about 800 beds short. So we have poor flow. That's why we're getting £500 million rebuild, which is wonderful. But at the moment there is poor flow. But this is not about flow. This is about improving the care of the patients on the acute floor, both in A&E and AMU, regardless of 4-hour targets. Patient safety and patient care is the key thing. Okay, obviously we want to improve flow, absolutely, and want to improve the targets, but the key thing is about what care we're providing, because if they're not leaving the department and they stay there for 18 hours, we still want to give them the best possible care in their department. So we started to do this, and so F2s, for example, would do the full clerking, or our clinical fellows do the full clerking, and then reviewed directly by the medical consultants. It's a great education. What that meant was there was a lot less patients for the medical SHOs to clerk. So the ones they would see be the ones that an A&E registrar or consultant would see. So I would see at the front door someone who's going to fast AF, say 11 o'clock at night, 85, and I'm just picking exactly the one I saw last night, 11 o'clock at night, 85-year-old, got into fast AF. She was septic. Watch why she's going to fast AF. We gave her fluids, gave her antibiotics, we gave her some digoxin. She slowed down. She was improved. Her lactate went from 4 to 2. But I did the initial clerking, which was 1 page maximum, okay, and then referred directly to the medical SHO who fully clerked them. Okay, so the medical SHOs are seeing the ones that the A&E consultant are seeing, the A&E registrars or the GP expecteds. So what you've got is you divvy up the work much more evenly. So when in the past, the medical SHOs used to come on shift for their night shift with 15 to see. Now the complaints we get from the medical SHOs is there's not enough patients to see. They're not getting enough clerking. Well, the answer is, and this is what they do, they need to present themselves. If the medical team are quiet, they present themselves to the front door, and A&E consultants are trying to triage at the front door 9 hours a day. So when they first arrive, right, that one will be clerked by an A&E SHO because it's likely to go home. This one is almost definitely going to go admitted medical, so we get a medical SHO to clerk them. So it needs great cooperation between the care of the elderly team, the acute medical team, and the A&E team. But what we've done the last 4 years, I don't know how we would have coped without single clerking, because when we looked at the man hours, you need roughly 45 minutes less per patient when you do single clerking, because you don't have to double up the work. Probably, and the numbers we admit, if we're having to have that manpower of extra numbers, we just wouldn't be able to cope. So what it's allowed is the medical SHOs, where when they're on duty, they can, you've got dedicated ones for clerking and dedicated ones for the wards. One dedicated for the wards can stay on their wards. Okay, the ones dedicated for clerking can actually be down in clerking. You don't need to bring all the medical SHOs down to clerking, because actually there's not the weights. And I can't directly put this down to clerking, but we've had, for example, a 66% reduction in MET calls over the last couple of years out of hours on the medical wards, and that's probably because of better staffing on the medical wards, because all the medics are not necessarily all clerking, so they're able to review the patients on the wards because medical time is being used much better. So it's really improved training for our juniors. The medical SHOs, for example, in the past, the medical F2 would never see SVT, would never see acute VT, would never see acute presentations. They'll just do the clerkings after. They're getting to see that. The A&E SHOs are fully presenting to the medical registrars and medical consultants and getting really good training. Our registrars do not do single clerking. It's not good use of their time, nor do the consultants. So they are doing much more of the consultant or senior decision-making work. And the difficulty in bringing it in is it does take more time for your A&E SHOs. So you actually must have a system where you cannot allow the A&E weights to go up. Okay, and so you have to have flex that if the medics are quiet, they will come over to A&E. You have to have sufficient juniors in A&E to allow it to happen. And when the medics are quiet, they must come across to help. And so, it initially had a lot of resistance amongst consultant colleagues, and to me, it really annoys me. It's still at times we've got weights, and my SHOs are doing full clerkings, but I know it's the right thing for the patients. So it really has made a big difference. Loads of hospitals adopted it during COVID, but actually, people need to really adopt it throughout the whole time, I think, because it's just made such a stepwise change to our training and quality of care.
Thanks, Rob. That's really interesting, and I guess there's really something about it's not the document, it's actually the relationship building, the trust between ED and specialties and medicine, and how you work together with the patient at the heart of what you're doing. Because a lot of people think if you implement this document, then the problems will be solved, but it really isn't. It's all of the pathway and process around that.
The document, I couldn't care less if we did single clerking on a blank piece of paper, to be honest. Now, obviously, the document is useful because you get all the, your smoking history, you get all the things where you can remind them to give them smoking cessation, you remind them to do a frailty score. So the document is very useful. And the document is very, very good because the first page is the A&E Consultant review or A&E Registrar, and then it goes to full clerking, then it goes to post-take all round, day 1, day 2, day 3. So it is very, very good document. But the document in itself makes no difference at all. It's about the culture that a medical consultant will quite happily take a presentation of a clerking from an A&E F2. So it does mean that people need to trust, medics need to trust the A&E departments. A&E needs to trust that the medical registrars, consultants, instead of their SHOs sitting in the mess, relaxing, they'll be pushing them into the A&E department. And so, I think the best way of doing it is actually to have biscuits and coffee in the A&E coffee room for the medics and making it a medical and A&E coffee room, so they feel comfortable there, and rather than retreating to the mess, because actually the centre of the hospital for junior doctors should be A&E and not the mess, and they should be relaxing in the A&E coffee room when there's not patients to see, but coming out and working as a team when there are patients to see. It works. In all honesty, we want to do it for all specialties. It works very well for medicine. In some ways with surgery, you don't. It was a step too far, and actually some of the surgical SHOs are instead of us doing the surgical SHO clerking, they have other roles such as consenting and putting them on theatre lists, and so we don't really do it for we will do this. We'll do the single clerking book clerk absolutely for them, but we know the surgical SHOs are not going to come down and see patients directly for us. But the concept works just as well for surgery. But the main benefits is for your majority of your patients, your care of the elderly and your acute medical take. And what it's allowed us is to then develop things. You've got enough juniors now to set up to ACU, same day emergency services, that type of thing, and ACU. And in the past, if they were re-clerking all the A&E patients, you would not have time to set up ambulatory care. You wouldn't have the staffing to run ambulatory care units.
That's great, thank you. And I know we've sort of scratched the surface really with that, because there's lots of other questions that I would like to ask. But at the end of the day, it is about building those relationships, working together for the right thing, to do the right thing for patients. And one of the things that always used to be said to me is the patients are fed up telling the same story to 10 different people through their admission pathway, and then their history changes as depending on who you talk to. And it is about building that trust that someone who's taken that clerking at the first point actually is telling the truth and is doing the right job. And it sounds like you've got a really good relationship with your medics and trust there. So really thank you for today. I really appreciate everything that you've shared.
There's one safety thing you do need to be wary of. Often a second review is useful just to clarify the history. But one thing, what could be, the key is the post-take ward round, which, the word post-take ward round really is a misnomer from the olden days where you waited till the next day. We're constantly post-taking. And so, the A&E SHOs clerk them at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, and they're post-taking them at 5 o'clock by the medical registrar. So you are going to get that second opinion. So it's people think, oh, the second clerk is really useful to check the facts. Actually, that can be done by the senior review.
Yeah. Lovely. That's really helpful. And really thank you for your time today. And I hope everyone's enjoyed our little podcast with Rob. Really appreciate it.
Thank you very much.